Today, Pinarello has launched a brand new range of bikes. In fact, what they've really done is thrown out most of what they did have in their mid-tier range offering and have replaced it with two new lines of bikes to target a more affordable price point. The Dogma has remained, but the Paris and the Prince, well, they've gone. Instead, Pinarello has opted for a more simplified lineup and one which appears to have more consistency throughout the range. I have been lucky enough to ride one of the new bikes and there is a lot to like, but sadly, there are some things which I'm not the biggest fan of. So be sure to stay tuned later on in the video for my first ride impressions. First up, let's get into what was actually launched. We'll start with what the brand is calling the new F series. This takes the place in which the Prince used to sit. Now, this range of bikes is designed to mimic the same ride characteristics as the top-end Dogma F. So think racy and aggressive. Initially, the series is being launched with three models, the F5, the F7 and the F9. And the reason behind the numbering in this series is to differentiate between the different models. So the higher the number, the higher the spec. You'll also not find a painted number on the frame itself, because as we all know, parts can be upgraded. So while you may have bought an F7, you could then upgrade the parts to match that of an F9 and voila, you've got an F9. Now, while the group sets are the main differentiating factors between the bikes, the wheel options also change, along with the handlebars. On the F7 and the 9, you'll get the Talon Ultra Carbon integrated bars, and on the F5, you'll get an integrated two-piece alloy setup. Both F7 and 9 will be rolling on in-house brand Most carbon wheels, while the F5 will be making the best of some alloy Fulcrum racing wheels. Looking past the components for a moment, the carbon layup in the F series itself will slightly differ. The F7 and the F9 will use the same Toray T900 carbon fibre, however, the F5 will use a slightly lower grade T700 carbon fibre. Now, to put that into context, the top-end Dogma F uses T1100 carbon fibre. So when you start to line the models up next to each other, you can really start to see the natural progression of the carbon fibre used throughout the entire range. As mentioned, the geometry is similar to the Dogma. However, when you look at the numbers, it's not exactly the same. But this is down to the fact that the Dogma is available in 11 sizes, and the F series is available in 9. So they had to shimmy a few bits around just so they knew that each size was right. F series to one side, in place of the old Paris, we now have the X series. Now, the X series range of bikes now sits as the brand's endurance offering, and at the moment will utilise the same carbon layup. In this initial launch, we have the X1 and the X3, which will wear mechanical 105 and 105 Di2 respectively. The X3 will also be available in a SRAM rival build. Both the X1 and the X3 will use the same T600 carbon. When you start to look at the specification that's offered here, you can start to see a bit of a pattern emerge. Put it this way, I wouldn't be surprised if in the future we start to see more bikes in the X series range, maybe an X5, an X7 and an X9, which then match the F series in terms of spec offering and an increase in grade of carbon fibre. And likewise, I think we'll see more affordable versions of the F series, so think F1 and F3. I can imagine what's stopping Pinarello from coming out with those bikes right now is the availability of parts from component manufacturers, and they may also not want to have the models competing with each other at this initial launch. So those are the specs of the bikes and what Pinarello is actually releasing. But what are they like to ride? Well, during my time at the launch event, I was able to have a really good go on the F7. And well, there were a lot of good things to say about it, but also some not so great things. So let's get into them. First up, we'll start with the good stuff. The bike looks the part. There's no question about where it's come from and where it's drawn its inspiration. The clean colorways generally look really good across the range, and I think they'll stand the test of time. The F series has done a really good job at replicating the same ride feel that the Dogma gives you. And while I did have about 30mm of spacers underneath my handlebars, and it would have been really good to ride it slammed, I will say it provided a really similar experience. The bike itself came alive when it was at speed. It felt really balanced and it beckoned me to really lean into the corners without making me worried that it was going to twitch out. However, on to what I believe are some of the downsides of this bike, and this goes for both F7 and F9. It really is let down by the wheels and tyre choice. The most carbon wheels that are fitted really are just rebadged wheels from Vision, and they certainly sit in the mid-range of the wheel market. They numb the ride and they feel harsh. When you pair that with the Pirelli P7 tyres, the losses, well, they go even further. It's a real shame that Pinarello didn't fit a pair of Pirelli P0 tyres. I did question them about the decision and they said that they didn't fit Pirelli P0s because that's what comes on the Dogma. To me though, that doesn't really stack up. The F-Series is designed to sit below the Dogma, but that doesn't mean that you can't fit top-tier tyres, especially when you consider how much this bike is likely going to cost. Really, Pinarello is forcing the end user to upgrade those tyres right from the get-go. New tyres really would help this bike, and even though the wheels aren't great, it would be a step in the right direction. Other things that I'm not the biggest fan of is that as the bike sizes get bigger, the frames start to look a little bit weird. To my eye at least, the smaller frame sizes definitely look much better. And luckily, I ride quite a small frame, so it works out well for me. But for some of my colleagues, the shapes do start to look a little unwieldy. Lastly, as I mentioned earlier, the bike comes alive at speed. It's a real joy to pilot on the descents, climbs, and open flat sections. However, when riding around town or just at more sociable paces, it doesn't feel quite as special. It feels rather normal and a bit samey to everything else. Now, perhaps this is too harsh, and the same argument could be applied to most other top-end road bikes out there. But when you compare the two different personalities of the F-Series, the difference in riding experience is really large. If anything, it just makes me want to push harder to chase that feeling you get from riding fast. I think if you do buy the F, then bear in mind that you'll probably want to change the wheels and maybe get something a bit more premium and something that's just more attuned to the level that that bike is on. New wheels, I think, would help the bike at slower speeds, and actually, I think they would also allow you to push even harder at higher ones. I believe new tyres are a must. Again, you'll want range-topping rubber to make sure that you get the most out of that bike. Happily, the F-Series has clearance for 30mm wide tyres and the X-Series has clearance for 32mm wide tyres, so you're not going to be limited by the frame. The F7 is the model that makes the most sense to me. I believe that anyone wanting Dura-Race would probably just take the extra step and buy a full-blown Dogma. The F7 second-tier Ultegra group set matches the second-tier nature of the F-Series. The models that sit below the F7 simply provide more value and allow more people to get onto the F-Series platform. But my recommendation of upgrading the wheels and tyres will probably ring true even sooner into any ownership experience. At the moment, I've only ridden the F-Series, but the X-Series will be coming in for test very soon. Given that the X has roughly taken the Dogma geometry but reduced the reach by around 13mm and increased the stack by over 30mm, it should make for a fairly relaxed riding experience, but the effects of those changes remains to be seen. We have seen pricing for the bike, and I've put a little graphic on screen so you can have a look at some of the build options offered. The entry-level F5 comes in at £5,250 here in the UK, which is less than half the price of a Dogma F. So, if you've always wanted something that performs like the range-topping F, then maybe the F5 is for you. Different bikes will be made available in different parts of the world, and this table also doesn't show all builds that Pinarello will be making available. But parking that to one side, what do you make of this new range of bikes? Have the new changes made the range any easier to understand? Do they still pull on your heartstrings as much as the Dogma might do? Let me know down in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, then please do drop it a like, subscribe to the channel for more content, and I'll see you again very soon.